Sounds like you had a pretty special and intimate relationship with this hammer, and that losing it was almost comparable to losing a loved one.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Hey there, Gothamites. Welcome to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist of the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. So we're here today to talk about the film The Batman.
I don't think that that's true. That's not what I have on my schedule. That's not what I have on my schedule.
We didn't have that planned? That was slotted in for today?
No,
I'm talking about the Matt Reeves film, The Batman.
I know exactly.
Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman.
It's literally the movie that came out 2 days ago. So I think
Robert Pattinson as the Batman.
I think we're going to give our listeners an opportunity to see the movie before we talk about it. But I can tell you've got a whole lot to say.
It's all I've been thinking about.
I understand. Well, okay. So then one sentence answer. You recommend this for our listeners then?
You know, I can't really say everything in one sentence. So all I will say is that everybody needs to go see this film. I'd say this. If you listen to the show regularly, then The Batman might be for you. It
has everything you could possibly want, and maybe more of it than you actually want.
Maybe more. I would even say if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this show, stop listening. Go buy a ticket.
Go see it.
Go to the theater.
Come back and listen to us talk about a completely different movie because we're not talking about Batman yet.
I might slip in some non-spoiler statements about Batman.
Throughout this episode? I don't think that...
You'll hear. People will know. People will know.
Yeah, they'll be able to pick up the codes. All right. Okay, so you enjoyed that movie. Speaking of Batman, though, in celebration of this... the release of this movie, DC partnered up with Lego and released, I guess, what would be considered art prints, sort of. It is a beautiful box of, how do I describe it? It's basically, 3, 6, 9 tiles that you put together. And if you follow the instructions, you can do one of 3 different images. There's Batman, there's Joker, and there's Harley Quinn. And you have enough pieces in each box to do any of the 3 that you want. And these are all beautifully designed by Jim Lee, iconic Batman artist. And so here's the cool thing. If you buy 2 of them, you can put together an extra wide, like a double wide image of Catwoman and Batman face to face. Catwoman's got like her hand up on the side of his face.
It's a very Hush-like.
Yeah, the city, the night city, Gotham City is behind them. It's beautifully done. If you buy 3 of these, you can do a triple tall portrait of Batman. It's basically him from his bat belt up, and he's got it like a batarang. Behind him, clearly something's gone down. There's smoke. It's red. It's like a red sky. Beautifully. Again, all 5 of these images done by Jim Lee. I went and bought 3 of them. Because
you did.
I wanted to do the tall image of Batman. We've got some wonderful empty wall space leading toward our studio. And I thought this would be perfect. And I spent the last 2 days building Batman. And I got to tell you, I loved it. I was not really a Lego kid growing up. But I loved putting this together. And... you loved sort of seeing the updates, right? Like, I would constantly bring you up
I'd say
to.
that I contributed 2 pieces. And let me just give our listeners a little heads up. If you're like me and you suffer from trypophobia, which is the discomfort around holes. Yeah, basically a pattern of holes like honeycomb or coral, or some people feel this way around Swiss cheese or strawberries types of food, pomegranates, sponges, bubbles,
Anything with like a
condensation.
cluster of.
Yeah, I often say like just a disgust of clusters. This isn't as bad, but each of the pieces, they're those little one piece.
Yeah, little one piece
circles.
circular. Yeah.
And far away, it looks beautiful. I think it's very stunning. It's vibrant. I can't wait for this to be displayed on our wall. But I will say that up close, I just had a reaction to it, and I prefer not to participate in the assembly of this art. But way to go, and what a cool thing for Lego to do.
I know, right? It's beautiful. And apparently they've done other properties. I didn't know this existed till Jim posted it on his Instagram. But so I immediately had to pre-order them. They are pricey. I'm not going to lie. Again, I'm not really a Lego guy. I'm told Lego is pricey, their sets now.
Yeah.
But they are pricey. And so if you're going to get 3 of them, you are basically paying for a piece of art to go up on your
Yikes.
wall. But it is cool. It's got like his signature as one of the pieces. So you can just stick the signature with the DC collection, right there in the corner. And so you really do feel like you've got like a piece of art that you helped build. And it's right there on the wall. I highly recommend it. I thought it was cool. Apparently, Drea, they've also made some in the past. Like they've got Star Wars. Apparently, they've got like one of those like triple talls where you've got like Darth Vader with a lightsaber.
Oh, cool.
That's I saw. But yeah, it was cool. I liked it. Also, speaking of Batman, our last little Batman bit. We should probably talk about this episode's sponsor. Not all heroes wear capes, but they do all wear undies. MeUndies' favorite superhero just so happens to wear both. Who's known to fight crime, drives an amazing car, and has some family drama? That's right. MeUndies is teaming up with Batman for their latest collection. Joining Batman is everyone's favorite, beloved anti-heroine, Catwoman. Which side will you join?
Let me just say that, to be totally candid right now, I am wearing MeUndies, and I found them to be super soft, very casual, loose. This is very, very much like loungewear. Yeah. I'm wearing the pants.
Yeah, you got the pants that I got last time, right? And
I've loved it. Frankly, it's, it's difficult to change and put on other clothes when I do leave the house.
Yeah.
I wish I could just wear these lounge pants. And in fact, some of the lounge pants, the black ones in particular, are very much versatile, and I think taking some casual trips to the store might be totally fine in these. But again, super comfortable, loose fitting. They have pockets, and the sizing I found to work really well. I didn't have to really second guess this. There's lots of sizing options.
Right. When Gotham City is under attack, you must decide if you're going to be on the side of darkness or the side of justice. Make your choice with 2 new limited edition prints featuring your favorite Caped Crusaders, Batman and Catwoman, available in super soft undies, socks, loungewear, and more in a range of sizes from extra small to 4XL. Both heroes and villains are guaranteed to stay cozy in these prints. If you really can't decide between the 2, go ahead and grab both in our hero and villain pack.
So MeUndies has a great offer for our listeners. For any first-time purchasers, you get 15% off, and MeUndies ships right to your door. So make sure you check out the new Batman and Catwoman prints before they're gone. So to get 15% off your first order and 100% satisfaction guarantee, go to MeUndies.com/Arkham. That's MeUndies.com/Arkham.
Let's get to it, Drea. We're talking about everyone's favorite blonde-locked god of thunder. We're talking about Thor. And we're talking about Ragnarok. Probably the most entertaining of the Thor movies, the Thor standalones, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. A very well-written, humorous, very, very tight story. I remembered this movie as having just a ton of things going on, but in the rewatch, I realized it's pretty straightforward. There's a displacement. Let me just say that Loki and Thor get lost. This is their kind of moment of going adrift, right?
Yeah.
Ending up in a faraway planet, having that fish out of water experience. And for Thor in particular, which I think has become a common theme for him, losing his power or losing his hammer. And then most of the movie is them finding their way back and having to reconnect and rebuild their relationship, essentially working together in order to fight another person in their family, Hela, who is their sister.
The sister they just learned they have.
Yeah.
So
for these,
but you're not wrong. You said that you felt like it was all over the place. You're not wrong. There are two movies within this movie, basically. I mean, you could spend the entire movie just dealing with the Hela plot line, which is all taking place there at Asgard as she's taking over. And technically, it is her rightful place to take over.
Yeah.
She is the firstborn daughter of...
She's the eldest. Mm-hmm. And she may have the right to the throne, so to speak. We've said before that Thor's story tends to be Shakespearean, and I think here we have another example. I didn't read a lot of Shakespeare, but the essence of the characters having this family drama really driving most of the story, and a bit of a few surprises that they have to encounter and work through.
Yeah, and they get to officially say goodbye to their father. The movie basically opens with them. I mean, it opens with a very unique and funny bit of foreshadowing. It's Thor learning about the prophecy of Ragnarok, which is the destruction of Asgard, and but ultimately the movie kind of really starts when Thor goes back home to Asgard, finds that Loki, who, as we remember in Dark World, faked his own death, faked his own sacrifice, his own sort of sacrificial death, took over as Odin in Asgard, tucked Odin away somewhere. We find out that he tucked him away at an old person's home, which is now being demolished.
Over on the planet Earth.
Yeah, in New York.
He's essentially banished his own father.
Yeah. And with the help of Doctor Strange, they find him basically on the shoreline somewhere looking out over the water. It's a beautiful image. And Odin basically tells his two sons that his time's up, and tells them now, for the first time, his daughter, who is going to be visiting them as soon as he's gone, because it was really just his life, his power, that was keeping her at bay. And the moment he disappears into a flurry of firefly-like fiery cinders out into the world.
Ooh, a little bit of a forecasting of future disintegrated people.
Yeah. She instantly shows up. Hela instantly shows up. And Hela is the goddess of death. It seems to me like maybe they should stop sort of giving these sorts of titles to their kids, because they're really, you've got the god of thunder. Turns out he's going to wield lightning. It's in his name. Now you've got the goddess of death.
Well, you have the god of mischief.
And you've got the god of mischief. Like maybe if you stop giving them these god titles, they won't be so...
So the truth of the matter is that she is a god. And no matter what she's called, she is so destructive that she's able to destroy Thor's hammer. Unlike anyone else, she's matched him
simply by
power.
Squeezing it. It's destroyed. But we also see in future scenes when she's there on Asgard, we see some of the the murals that are painted on the history of Odin and Hela working together side by side to conquer the 9 realms. They were very much a war-driven race at that time. We see that she was holding Mjolnir at one point. So she is potentially the first owner of the hammer. So what seems impossible to Thor is very possible to Hela. Now, like I said, that entire story could have been the movie, but really the movie mostly takes place on Sakaar. It's Loki and Thor en route to Asgard using the Bifrost, are leading her back to Asgard. She knocks them both out of the way. They leave the Bifrost to go to someplace we don't know. Turns out Loki gets very safely to Sakaar and is sort of taken in by the people there, the wealthy, the elite.
And the passing of time is different on the planet Sakaar, so he must have landed just a few moments, like maybe in our time minutes, before Thor did, but that translated into several weeks where he was able to use his skills and maybe some manipulative, charming abilities to gain favor with the leadership on this planet.
Yeah. Thor, though, gets there and is captured basically as he's going to be a gladiator, right? He's clearly a fighter. He's captured and is taken to the Grand Master, played beautifully by Jeff Goldblum. And he is going to be the new challenger to the current reigning champion of the gladiator games. That gladiator champion, it turns out, is Hulk. We've wondered where Hulk's been since Age of Ultron, when he took off from Sokovia and was in the Quinjet, was being begged by Black Widow to come back, and he didn't. We have not seen him since. Turns out he has been on Sakaar basically just kicking butt as a gladiator, where he is loved, unlike Earth, where he is feared and just generally hated.
I wondered about this because he's basically been in the form of Hulk. He's not been Bruce Banner for 2 years.
Correct.
And of course, we know that the Hulk stays the Hulk based on a particular emotion. He's typically angry. There's usually some antecedent, some trigger, and he manifests this huge beast-like large green thing. And it's interesting that for 2 years he's been able to stay the Hulk. And there's something about the reinforcement here, being this championed fighter in many ways, just getting that affirmation, getting that acceptance from this like strange planet and its leader. He's stayed the Hulk. And I think he's not always angry. He's not been angry for 2 years, but it does seem as though he's been getting enough social interpersonal reinforcement for being the Hulk that he's able to sustain that persona. He's able to sort of like keep this long-standing emotional state enough to continue to perform as the Hulk.
Yeah. It just occurred to me as you mentioned that he'd been there for 2 years. It's been 2 years since the Battle of Sokovia. So time doesn't move that much differently on Sakaar, right? He's been here 2 years. He's been Hulk for 2 years, we establish. So maybe it's only different by a matter of
Well, maybe he
weeks.
Sees it as 2 years.
Well,
no, you're right.
Yeah, because when he comes back in his banner, he's like, "You're telling me I've been Hulk for 2 years?" And Thor says, "Yeah." So maybe the Bifrost is different. Maybe simply the fact that Loki fell out of the Bifrost first made it a matter.
Although, who is he? The Grandmaster.
Yeah,
he did say
time moves a little differently.
Differently here. So there's a little...
That could have also been, though, to hide the fact that he's technically millions of years old, but only looks like he's in his 70s, 60s, 70s. I don't know. I'm not going to question it too much. It's a Marvel movie.
Well, what we do know is, at least from the Hulk's perspective, well, this is now Bruce Banner's perspective, because he does transform back to Bruce Banner toward the middle. I'd say like the third act of the film. He does transform back to Bruce Banner, and he processes this. He's actually finding it quite challenging. It's quite difficult. He says his brain is just trying to integrate and synthesize all of the information that he's getting. He's on a different planet. He's never been off Earth before. He's been essentially subdued. Like his consciousness has been overtaken by the Hulk, which is potentially for him upsetting, maybe violating, maybe just disorienting. And he's learning that the Hulk is revered and has had this huge place in this society. So he's trying to, I think you might have some of this conversation. It's between Bruce Banner and Thor.
I do have some of that conversation. Let's take a listen now.
The whole thing is totally different this time. I mean, in the past, I always felt like Hulk and I each had a hand on the wheel. But this time, it's like he had the keys of the car and I was locked in the trunk.
Well, you're back now. That's all that matters.
No, it's not what matters. What I'm trying to tell you is that if I turn it to the Hulk again, Banner may never come back. And we're stranded on a planet that is designed to stress me out.
I think what's most fascinating about that is that he knows, or at least he's felt as though he's been in the trunk while this other persona has been at the wheel, knowing that this other person is reckless and potentially dangerous, impulsive, anger-driven. Bruce doesn't see himself, at least at this time, he doesn't really align with Hulk. He doesn't see himself as Hulk.
And the really, as we heard, the really problematic part of this is that clearly, unlike the past, Hulk seems to be in charge. He is in control. He's the one who is keeping Banner at bay. It's not just a matter of, like, as we've seen throughout the course of this movie, Hulk is walking around calm. He's in a spa, like a hot tub, drying off. He doesn't really seem to be, he seems to certainly be full of rage, because he even talks about the fact that he's just constantly in this rageful fire state. But
there's a contentment about it.
Right, yeah. And so you would think, oh, maybe he would calm down and become Banner, but the Hulk is keeping Banner from coming back.
Yeah.
And so Banner obviously is afraid that his personality might simply cease to exist the next time Hulk.
Yeah, this really does fall within the definition of trauma. Sometimes we say that trauma is any threat to a person's life or serious injury, but sometimes we'll say it's generally speaking some kind of threat to your personhood or to your existence, meaning that if Bruce's fear here is that he may continue to be living in some way, but trapped within this monster, that realization for him is incredibly traumatic. That experience itself of being trapped for 2 years is a sense of disorientation and displacement. Like, what have I missed? Who am I? How do I put together my sense of self if I've not really fully been here? So it's almost similar to, it's not exactly like this, but remember how we talked about Cap being frozen for how was that, like 70 years or something, and waking up to a new world was traumatic for him.
Yeah.
He had a sense of self that didn't quite fit the place that he woke up in. And there's some smaller level or version of this where Bruce is waking up to a planet he's never been before, a culture he doesn't understand, and the realization, the shock of having been trapped in the Hulk's body for this long.
So in a way, Thor Ragnarok has kind of become Hulk's movie, his shining moment in the MCU to some degree, right?
Well,
we've learned a lot about him just as a side character in this particular film. And we've learned that Hulk can make friends, right? Because he's clearly friends with another Asgardian in the named simply Scrapper 142, also known as Valkyrie later, when we find out that she was one of the legendary Valkyries. But Hulk is able to have an interpersonal relationship with this person. Like they have become buddies. They train together. He goes off, he gets suited up in armor and walks away with her. And she has a pet name for him and he has a pet name for her. And so, and notice it's Angry Girl, right? Like he calls her Angry Girl. So he has some sort of kinship with her. But I am learning a lot about Hulk in this movie, that not only does he have the strength and ability to control his existence within the body of Banner, but he is also starting to be something more than just a big green rage monster.
Well, and not to be too much of a psychologist about this, but
no, by all means, don't be a psychologist, Drea.
But Valkyrie essentially is her own version of the Hulk on this planet. We learn that she's been in these war-torn conflicts. Her original role, her original persona and self-esteem was really aligned with this fighter lifestyle as a Valkyrie. Honor and duty, and
we should talk about what the Valkyries are. So let our listeners know what was a Valkyrie.
So, as far as I understand it, a Valkyrie is a member of this community of female warriors who defended Asgard. Yeah, and they had. I mean,
they're They're like a super team. They're the elite guard.
Yes, and you say elite. They are skillful, talented, powerful. They
ride on Pegasus.
Yes, they're. I don't believe that they're gods, but they certainly are godlike. They certainly can stand alongside God.
They are worthy of being the guards to gods.
Guards to gods. Oh, what a good band name. Guards to gods.
Saw them open up for who this past weekend?
Well, and so it means that she knows the Asgard culture. It means that she knows the Asgard history.
But she's so disillusioned by all of it.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't associate with it anymore.
Yeah.
She's no longer a Valkyrie. She's now just Scrapper 142 who's constantly drunk and
here's
picking
what
up
she does.
People.
She's like Hulk in a way. This Valkyrie is driven by anger, and she subdues the rest of her identity by drinking hard liquor most of the day. So she's able to live and exist only in one part of her personality or one part of her identity. She's very fragmented in that way. So there's this companionship that makes sense, right? That maybe they understand each other on some level. Maybe they relate to one another. They certainly, as you said, have found some level of kinship or comfort. And going back to Hulk for a second, he's reluctant to leave this planet as Hulk. Before he transforms back to Bruce Banner, he looks around and notices that this lifestyle is one that suits him. And when he does recall his experience on Earth, it's very negative. He feels unwanted there. He's a monster. He's a monster there, and he's treated like one. So it's understandable that he's reluctant to leave this trash planet and help Thor.
But also doesn't want Thor or Scrapper 142 to leave. He says that they can, he's going to stay, but they can go. But then when they actually do make their move to go, he's like, friend, stay. Like he doesn't want them to go. I just thought too, with Valkyrie's character, Valkyrie is ancient, right? Like she's older than Thor by a lot because she remembers
Hela.
She fought against Hela. She's never aged, right? Because even in her memory, she looks the same. Her hair is down, but that's about it. So you really do get a sense of sort of this immortal, the Asgardians being immortal. I mean, just think about how old Thor must be just to look as old as he does. He's ancient because Thor, the god of thunder.
Right. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah. I mean, she looks like his contemporary, but she is clearly an elder to Thor because she was fighting his sister long before he was ever even born.
Well, and Thor, I wouldn't say this is his comeuppance or that he needs one, but he does on this planet experience a lot of humbling encounters.
This seems to be the theme with Thor movies.
Yeah. Lose your power, find something about yourself that embraces humanity.
Get back together with your brother.
Yeah. Your brother's going to stab you in the back.
Yeah.
Because it's what he does.
Right.
But, I'd say in the big picture, they keep making movements forward. Like they make some progress. There's a little bit of understanding between the two of them.
Particularly in this movie, because there is the moment in the elevator, and I have this piece of audio because I feel like it's an important moment, especially for you, Drea, who loves Loki. This idea that he was always going to become good at some point, and this happens in every single movie where he teams up with Thor at the end, with the exception of Avengers. He teams up with Thor at the end to save the day, and then is sacrificed or dies or whatever. And in this particular movie, there is a moment in an elevator. I want to take a listen to it here.
Come on, this place is perfect for you. It's savage, chaotic, lawless. Brother, you can do great here.
Do you truly think so little of me?
Loki, I thought the world of you. I thought we were going to fight side by side forever, but at the end of the day, you're you and I'm me. And I don't know, maybe there's still good in you, but let's be honest, our paths diverged a long time ago.
And there's also this.
Dear brother, becoming predictable. I trust you. You betray me round and round in circles we go. See, Loki, life is about growth. It's about change, but you seem to just want to stay the same. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you'll always be the god of mischief, but you could be more.
The dynamic between the two of them is such a study, right? Because we've talked about it before, how Loki is this adopted brother who is not under some delusion that he's treated differently. Mm-hmm. He was treated differently. Mm-hmm. He was in the shadow of Thor. And what he did in a way that I found kind of magnificent, in a way that I found developmental and healthy, was he found his own way to shine. He was talented. His mother taught him magic. Mm-hmm. And he learned how to use illusion and trickery and an intelligence mm-hmm. to succeed in life. So he kind of found his own package of skills that's actually very different than Thor.
Yeah.
Thor's not an idiot, but Thor, he doesn't plan. He's not future oriented. He doesn't have the level of executive functioning that Loki does. Loki had to work hard for it, and it does not surprise us. Loki's been on this planet several weeks, and he's already a part of the elite, right? Like, he's found his way to kind of to succeed socially. And there's Thor imprisoned by them, yeah. right? Because he's lost his power. So in a way, and I think Thor points this out, Loki's found his people. Like, mm-hmm. hey, this is exactly the kind of place, this trash planet is exactly the kind of place where you can be on top.
Yeah.
But I just want to address too the the idea of change, like the pattern that Thor has articulated here, which I think is smart to point out to his brother. He's saying essentially, you have this chronic style of manipulating me, of getting people close to you and then betraying them. And like we said on a previous episode, it can be tiring for that other family member. Thor is exhausted from it. Thor doesn't trust him. And yet in this specific situation, Thor knows he's got to. He's got to form some kind of alliance again with his brother. And I think Thor, in a bit of discernment here, Thor notices that Loki struggles. He sees Loki as someone who is at times suffering from this pattern. And Thor doesn't want to abandon him. Thor wants to continue to give him an opportunity to be good. And
but then when he needs to, he does abandon him.
Yeah.
He leaves him electrocuting on the floor.
Well, but Loki, I'm surprised that I'm even saying this, but Loki has already betrayed him. In that moment, they're just setting this up. The both of them have managed to escape to find the ship that they can retreat on. And because Loki, of course, has gathered the passcodes and has been able to navigate through all the different barriers here, they're actually able to escape. Loki betrays his brother and says, I can't pass up this opportunity to turn you in and get the reward.
Right.
So in that moment, it's Loki's interest in serving himself, not in the two of them being together and getting out of this place.
I want to ask you about the bigger picture of this movie, and specifically how it was, how it may or may not have been shaped by the film's director, Taika Waititi, who I think did a wonderful job with this film, and playing Korg, the ever lovable rock character. I want to ask what you thought about this. So as the movie progresses and Hela gets to Asgard, she moves into the throne room and notices the paintings on the ceiling and how it shows a peaceful, loving 9 realms, shows treaties having been signed. It shows Odin as being this benevolent ruler over the 9 realms, and Thor at his side, and angrily she throws a blade up into the ceiling and it knocks that veneer off, and underneath it you see an alternate history of war and bloodshed and conquering. And Taika, being Maori from New Zealand himself, this movie to me seems to be very much about the whitewashing of history.
An
about
erasure of the history.
Yeah, the covering up of this warlike conquering species, race, these people who conquered 9 realms, and Hela even says we were supposed to conquer more. But then Odin got a little iffy about that. Odin realized he couldn't control her any further, so he imprisoned her, right? And literally erased her history.
Yeah.
But in doing so, erased his own and became known as the benevolent ruler of the 9 realms, the guardian of the 9 realms, as opposed to the conqueror of the 9 realms. He was no longer a conquistador. He's now someone everyone respects and loves. And we've actually seen some of the other realms, and while they might respect Odin, they don't love him. They don't. The frost giants, for example, they don't look to him as their ruler. They seem almost just sort of imprisoned on their realm. I kind of wanted to get your take on that, on this story of erasure and the story of a group of people who have clearly got a history of conquering other people in other worlds, and then covering it all up for thousands of years to make it seem like they're the good guys.
Well, it's a covering up, and it's also a form of rewriting or adjusting the history, because as we've known, this culture, Asgardians, are deeply involved in their own history. They define themselves and practice the honoring of their place in the universe. And they do talk about conquering other places. Sure. But they do so in a way that doesn't shed light on the terror of that, on the essentially the displacement of other cultures, on the idea, which we've talked about, I think, in maybe the first Thor film, of believing that they are superior to these other places and planets.
And Odin always said that he basically did it to unite them and to...
It was never that, though.
Right.
And I think what's interesting, too, and I really love how this happens at the end of the film, it's not surprising that Hela then does it to her own people. Mm-hmm. So what she ends up doing is conquering Asgard, displacing, murdering, I would even say...
Sending an entire city of refugees out the...
It's a form of genocide that she's doing on these people because they're not giving in to her reign. Yeah. And then this group of this community, this indigenous group, becomes displaced. There are numerous refugees who then need to be taken to a safer planet. Mm-hmm. And so she's sort of taking on and replaying out the trauma that her own father was instilling on other planets, and she's directing it at her own, mm-hmm. or at least the place that she originally called home. Mm-hmm. And kind of swinging back to the brothers, Thor and Loki, and how they're managing this terror. It's a story of losing their home. It's a story of being displaced. It is this more powerful person coming in and staking claim and saying, if you're not going to be in line with my violent ways, I'll destroy you.
It becomes a coup. It becomes, even though she technically has the right to the throne, it becomes a coup d'etat against Thor and all of the loyal Asgardians as they are now versus how they were before.
Yeah, and I sort of get the sense, so it's kind of interesting because the Asgardians, the people of this community we don't really get their story firsthand, but we do get the sense that they do feel a sense of shared culture. That we've got to talk about Heimdall, that his disappearance during all of this, actually before all of this, mm-hmm. was for him then to later come in and save these folks. Yeah. And so he plays this important role, and we see him change from an armor-wearing protector, this mm-hmm. defender of Asgard, to this almost humble, mm-hmm. clothed mm-hmm. Man who's I wouldn't say
almost
he's
like a ranger.
Yeah, and he's not anonymous, but like he's wearing the hood over his face. You can't really see who he's in hiding, so he has to do a little bit of erasure himself in order to take on this role and protect these folks. And then after he protects hundreds, if not at that point thousands of survivors, he then helps to get them on the ship that Loki is bringing to them to then take them to a safer location. So Loki also does a bit of a transformation. Of course, I know, but I mean, it's another glorious moment for him. He gets to be the spotlight gets to be on him.
Glorious purpose.
And he, as we know, he benefits emotionally from that role, but he did play a part in this. He helped these refugees.
He plays a huge part in it because he's also the one who goes and grabs he's the one who has to go and grab the crown of Surtur and put it into the eternal flame, which then kicks off Ragnarok, right? So he's Asgard is destroyed because of Loki to some degree. I mean, it's not a bad thing in this case. I mean, of course, it's a horrible thing, but I mean, it's their way of getting out. It's their way of winning against Hela.
And so he has to participate in the decimation of his own home planet, one that is essentially, it's defined him. He's always scrambled and fought to be the leader of that place. And now he realizes, well, I don't have to be the leader of that place, but I've got to mean something to these people. So he goes from being a facade to being, I think, something a little bit more meaningful. And I just love that line, and I think it's Heimdall's line about community not being a place you live, but being the people who you are with.
Yeah, both Heimdall and Thor get to say it, that Asgard's not a place, it's a people.
Yeah.
And so wherever they are, Asgard will continue to exist. And by the way, we're seeing that kind of thing unfold right now in Ukraine, right? You've got the refugees leaving, and no matter where they go, Ukraine will be right there with them, whether their country ceases to exist as it is or not.
It's important that you mention that, because although this film doesn't go into it, this community will be together for the transition into the next part of their story. And
which sadly isn't
a lot happens.
It's not
a
very
lot
long.
happens.
Yeah.
And there's some realism to that. We get to see some of sadly, some of the suffering of this community. And it's important to uplift that and note that every part of a refugee's experience, what they have faced before fleeing or being rescued, what they're facing at the time of their refugee experience or status, being relocated, and then what happens after them, after their migration. What are the different barriers and challenges they face, ranging from economic struggle to financial hardships to the some of the even some of the discrimination and social barriers that they experience in their new home. So we've got to name that too for Ukraine, that we can't simply look at this conflict as being isolated during this time, and we can't simply say when it's over things will be better, but that usually a community will continue to experience the aftermath of the displacement, relocation, and refugee status, especially for those who do not return to their home.
Can we talk a little bit about Hela? She's sort of presented in this film as just the straight up villain, but I can't help but to feel like in her mind, she was created for this. Like, this is literally why she exists.
She's just doing what she knows to do.
Yeah, she was raised to conquer. And she even, when she gets to Asgard and finds that they're all against her, she even says, I thought you would all be happy to see me. And so it's you almost can't blame her for being who she is, especially given that she has been cast away by her father, and she did nothing but make him proud for 8 realms worth of conquering, and then suddenly she is cast away when he turns over a new leaf and imprisoned and literally forgotten. Think about this. We're just sort of pondering the ages of Scrapper 142 and Thor and all that. No one in this community seems to remember her. So think about how long ago that was. And think about, you really do find yourself wondering, how could people just have no idea who Hela is? Unless it's part of a spell that Odin and Frigga or anyone else put on the rest of Asgard to just sort of forget her existence. But no one knows who Hela is, except for Scrapper 142 later on a completely different planet. So what happened there? but again, I just kind of want to ask you about her. Is she justified? Not in the genocide of her own people or anyone else for that matter, but in feeling the way she does, feeling entitled, being the firstborn, feeling like it's her throne to take. If you're going to go with this sort of royal heritage, the rules, she should get access to that throne before Thor.
I think you should tap into that Shakespearean knowledge that you have. Aren't there storylines and narratives of these longstanding feelings of vengeance,
Sure.
or kind of emotional suffering that happens when family members will betray or even like destroy each other.
Yeah, all of this is Shakespearean. Yes.
Yeah, and I can't speak much to how the people think of her, but it's that, I think you named it. It's the entitlement that is so disproportionate to the original crime or a betrayal. I think imprisoning her is terrible, but she should be directing those feelings toward Odin. Ultimately, she is decimating all these people, all this culture, and it seems as though she's gone too far. She's sort of, it's a point of no return. And there is stepping away from Shakespeare and getting back into my territory, there is some work in the literature really centering on psychopaths, like people who will kill, mass murder, and do some horrific things. That sometimes when they've reached the point of no return, and it's called that, there's like a switch that happens. They then double down. Like, it's like, how can I come mentally at some place deep down? It's like a transition. How can I go back to being humane again? I can't. So they align with the horrors of it. They just continue to find meaning and connection, and they just go deeper into the recklessness.
Sure.
And I know that I'm going to make you surprised a little bit to say this, but people like Jeffrey Dahmer, for instance, I know you're like, what are you talking about?
No, I know you, and I've had many conversations with you.
Let me just say, like, the Riddler.
Dahmer had to come in at some point.
Like a fictional character like the Riddler, or a real person like Jeffrey Dahmer. There is, and Jeffrey Dahmer there were some explorations, of course, around his psychology. The idea that after having a taste, after getting past that point of no return, he then gives fully in to those desires and tendencies. And look, he's an example where there are some clear neurobiological, genetic, and psychosocial deficits that made him do the things that he did. Now, going back to Hela, so does that make sense? Like, Hela is completely deranged at this time.
Sure.
She is completely consumed by the betrayal and is now enacting these horrendous, awful things with just this consumption of power. And really, it's not logical.
I want to give you a little bit of trivia, a little background, because it's sort of all coming together. We talked an episode or two ago about Ego, the planet. We talked about the fact that he refers to himself as a celestial, but we know that he can't possibly be, because we now know what celestials are. I guess technically we can't talk about that in too great a detail because we've not gotten to the Eternals yet. But we did talk a little bit about it during that episode about, what is he? What could he possibly be if not a celestial? The Grand Master is from the comics. I'm guessing you've probably not spent any time with him in any of the comics you've ever read, but he's part of a collection of beings called the Elders of the Universe. We've met 2 elders previously in the MCU. Ego and the Collector. The Collector, you remember Benicio del Toro's character.
I was just going to say the Collector.
Right.
I don't know why. They seem to be odd people.
So,
like both the Collector and the Grand Master, they are odd. Like they're just like not, like I'd say not from this planet.
Well, and I think in the MCU too, they're supposed to be brothers.
Oh, that makes sense.
But yeah, they both come from the Elders of the Universe. And I think we're going to see even more of that intertwined in upcoming movies. Not the ones that we're covering right now, but like in future MCU movies that we've not yet seen. I'm very curious because, we've met Kang, the Conqueror, not in the course of our covering of the MCU, but I mean, like, we've met a version of Kang in the Loki series. Timelines are now starting to, and by the way, there is an elder named Father Time as well. So, I mean, these elders might become like this bigger part of the universe. Did you like Jeff Goldblum in this particular movie? You said he's odd. He's otherworldly.
Oh, he's certainly entertaining.
A lot of his dialogue, by the way, is improvised.
He's delightful. He's very much himself. It seems like he just embraced this character.
Yeah.
And there is something menacing about him. It's a scary. He can build. Maybe it's because he has that tool that can melt you, but there's a scary element to it.
But he also seems to be very careful about when he uses that tool. Like he does have a sidekick who constantly wants him to use it, but he's like, no, that's not a capital crime. Why are you handing me the melting stick?
But he did melt his own cousin.
Right. Well, but his cousin committed a capital crime. Okay. So, and then he pardoned him.
And then he melted him.
From life. Drea, did you like Ragnarok? Would you say that
I did.
Does this rank highly in
It's delightful. I recommend it. And I think it's rich with psychology. Again, you really get into the relationship with the 2 brothers. And again, you're holding on to the tension and the frustration you feel because you know that Loki is going to betray Thor. But as we talked about before, the impact that has on us is one where we begin to really understand what it might be like to be in that dynamic.
Yeah.
And interestingly, you know, in a previous episode, I mentioned the Hansel and Gretel concept among siblings. And I said that Nebula and Gamora weren't characterized by that. And I think that, and by the way, the Hansel and Gretel concept in developmental psychology is that having a parent or parents who are extremely punishing or abusive or put very, very strict limits on their offspring, that the children kind of align together and they survive through this closeness.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, that's not the only reason that the two of them would align. Like other siblings.
No,
have
and
aligned.
so it's almost their version of this is they're going through, like they did as children, they're going through some hardships and they're leaning on each other for survival. They no longer can lean on a guardian or a caregiver, so they have to lean on one another. So it's not exactly that relationship, but it has elements of that, and it's helpful to see this manifest. And we'll soon see where this goes. But what I will say is Thor is able to see some good elements in Loki. And when Thor encourages him, Loki's able to find the confidence to do something good. Yeah. And at the end of this film, he does something really good. And again, he finds he doesn't have to get value from being a king or ruling the Asgardian people, but he can be helpful. He can be seen as as one of their guardians. He can be seen as somebody that will be ultimately trusting and trustworthy. So that's sort of where I see the value here.
Why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online, Drea?
They can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, and on the socials at Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can find me at Twitter. I am at bward028. You can find me on Instagram at b_ward028. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions or on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. Come find us on Facebook. Come join us on Patreon. And as always, in March, there will be a sale over at TeePublic from March 9th through 13th or March 23rd through the 27th. You can get up to 35% off the Arkham Sessions merch. So go over to TeePublic and check us out and pick yourself up an Arkham Sessions t-shirt or sticker or mug or any number of other items that is over at TeePublic.
I also want to share a website for folks who want to help the refugees in Ukraine. It is help.rescue.org. There you'll find a bunch of different ways to contribute your donations and learn about the conflicts happening in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, and Yemen. So I just want to direct people there if they're willing to contribute.
Good cause. Want to thank the patrons who have helped us make this episode possible. There's my father, Carl Ward, Michael Pruitt, Weffy, Eric O'Sullivan, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Zach Neal, Zachary Hunter, Mike Blanchard, Dr. Girlfriend, Maria Diego, Nick Gilbert, Dr. Jerome Anderson, John Henry, Antonio Lopez, Jay Griffin Hughes, Todd Stashwick, Scott the Therapist, my best friend Frank Muller, and Mark Pepper. Thank you all for your contributions to our Patreon, and you can get your call out by joining our Patreon right now. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
I think we should disband the Revengers.